Every country on earth is in debt. Some owe billions, some owe trillions. Some owe more than they will ever produce in a lifetime. But here's the question no one asks. If everyone owes, who's getting paid? Because debt, by definition, is someone else's asset. And yet when you zoom out past headlines, past elections, past central bank press conferences, you notice something unsettling. There is no obvious winner. There's no visible vault where the money piles up. No single name at the top of the balance sheet. Instead, there's something else. An invisible ledger. A system of rules, incentives, and accounting tricks that doesn't just record debt, but decides who wins, who loses, and who never escapes. This ledger doesn't care about ideology. It doesn't care about borders. It doesn't care who you vote for. It quietly determines which nations get rescued, which ones get punished, and which ones are allowed to collapse. Once you see how it works, you can't unsee it. Part 1. Before the ledger existed, to understand the invisible ledger, we have to go back to a time when debt was simple, when money was real. For most of human history, money wasn't a promise. It wasn't an entry in a database. It was something gold, silver, grain, livestock. If a king borrowed, he borrowed physical value. If he couldn't repay, there were consequences: loss of land, loss of power, sometimes loss of life. Debt had teeth, but it also had limits. You couldn't borrow more gold than existed. Couldn't create silver with a signature. And lenders were cautious because if the borrower failed, the loss was real. That restraint mattered. Empires rose and fell, but debt couldn't grow faster than reality itself, till banking changed everything. Part 2. The first shift. Debt becomes abstract. The first crack in the old system appeared quietly. Goldsmiths, people used to store gold with goldsmiths for safekeeping. The goldsmith issued a receipt, a claim on gold, not gold itself. At first, receipts were honest. Every note matched real metal, but then someone noticed something dangerous. Those people never came back for their gold. They traded the receipts instead, and that's when the invisible ledger was born. Because the goldsmith realized something revolutionary. If no one asks for the gold, why not issue more receipts? This was the birth of fractional banking. Money was no longer limited by metal. It was limited only by confidence. Debt expanded. Credit multiplied, and risk became invisible. The ledger no longer showed reality. It showed belief. Part 3. Governments discovered the trick for centuries. This system stayed mostly private, but eventually, governments noticed. Wars were expensive. Empires needed armies, ships, roads, loyalty. Raising taxes was slow and unpopular. Borrowing real gold was limited. But borrowing promises, that was limitless. Governments partnered with banks. Central banks were born. And the invisible ledger went national. Debt stopped being a temporary emergency tool. It became a permanent operating system. Instead of asking, can we afford this? Governments asked, can we borrow this? And as long as markets believed repayment would happen someday, the ledger stayed balanced. On paper. Part 4. The rise. Debt becomes power by the 20th century. Debt wasn't a weakness. It was a weapon. Countries with strong currencies could borrow cheaply. Countries without them borrowed expensively, or not at all. The ledger began sorting winners and losers, not by productivity, not by resources, but by trust. And trust wasn't evenly distributed. Former colonial powers dominated finance. New nations started life already indebted. Loans came with conditions. Privatize this, cut social spending, open your markets, peg your currency, accept reforms. These weren't neutral policies. They were entries on the ledger. Debt became leverage. Part 5. The moment money stopped being real, then came the turning point. The U.S. ended the gold standard. For the first time in history, the world's reserve currency was backed by nothing. No metal, no commodity, just trust and military power. From that moment, the invisible ledger exploded. Money could be created instantly. Debt could grow forever. And no one could demand gold because there was none to demand. The system was free. Too free. Part 6. The feedback loop. Here is where the game truly changes. When money is created as debt, repayment requires more money. But that money also comes from debt, so the system needs constant growth, constant borrowing, constant expansion. If growth slows, debt breaks. If debt breaks, trust collapses. If trust collapses, currencies die. So the ledger enforces growth whether society can handle it or not. This is why crises are never allowed to fully reset. They're managed, delayed, papered over. Because a real reset would reveal the truth. The ledger doesn't balance. Part 7, The Breaking Point's History, gives us warnings. Latin America in the 1980s, Asia in 1997, Greece after 2008. Same pattern every time. Easy credit floods in debt, builds quietly growth, slows currency, weakens capital flees. Bailouts arrive with conditions, public wealth transfers, upward debt remains. The ledger never forgives. Losses are socialized. Gains stay private. Wait. When the ledger almost broke, the global financial crisis exposed everything. Banks created toxic debt. Risk was hidden. Balance sheets lied. When it collapsed, the question wasn't, who caused this? It was, who must be saved? The answer was clear. Banks were rescued. Markets stabilized. Executives kept bonuses. The ledger was protected. It's not justice, not accountability, just continuity. Part 9, The Modern Era. Debt without shame after 2008. Something changed psychologically. Debt stopped being scary. Trillions became normal. Deficits became permanent. Central banks became printers of last resort. The invisible ledger expanded again. But now, something new happened. Asset prices exploded. Stocks, real estate, crypto, those connected to the ledger benefited. Those outside it fell behind. Inequality wasn't an accident. It was an accounting outcome. Part 10, The Pandemic Acceleration. Then came COVID. Governments printed more money in 2 years than in decades combined. Emergency justified everything, and the ledger absorbed it. But inflation followed. Purchasing power fell. Savings eroded. Wages lagged. Again, the pattern repeated. Debt holders survived. Asset owners thrived. Cash holders lost. The ledger chose winners quietly. Part 11, The Failed Fixes. Every crisis brings solutions. Stimulus, austerity, rate hikes, rate cuts. But none address the root problem. Because the root problem is structural. Money is created as debt. Debt requires growth. Growth has limits. The invisible ledger doesn't solve crises. It postpones them. Part 12, The Modern Parallels Today. Global debt exceeds global GDP. Interest costs are rising. Growth is slowing. Trust is fragile. Central banks are trapped. Raise rates gives debt collapses. Lower rates gives inflation rises. The ledger has no clean exit. Part 13, Who really wins? So who wins the global debt game? Not countries, not workers, not taxpayers. The winners are those closest to money creation, those who receive new money first, those who own assets. It's not wages, those who understand the ledger. This isn't conspiracy. It's accounting. Part 14. 3 takeaways. Takeaway 1. Debt is not just money owed, it's power allocated. Takeaway 2. The system rewards proximity to credit, not productivity. Takeaway 3. Crises are features, not failures. Final warning, the open question, the invisible ledger, is still running. Balances are still growing. Trust is still holding barely. But no system escapes reality forever. The only question left is, who adjusts first, society or the ledger? Call to action if this changed how you see money, debt, and power. Subscribe. Because the most dangerous systems are the ones you don't see. And the ledger is still open.